Hello, everybody, and welcome to another hair-raising, exciting, expeditious episode of Radio Rama, where we primarily work on radios, stereos, record players, mostly stuff that runs on tubes from the 20s through about the 60s. And today we have a 1955 Arvin model 954P. This was donated by one of our members, Miles, who's probably watching. Thank you very much, Miles. And it's a cute looking set. It is AC or battery. And when I got it, it was missing the huge brass medallion that was here, which is kind of a bummer. And I didn't know what to do about it because you also see there's a little bit of kind of micro cracks going in through the knob itself. So my first idea was maybe to sand all that off and just have a clear knob, but then it would have possibly broken. And I was riding around in my Mercury and going to the grocery store, and I looked down on the floor and I found this guy. And I remember years, probably like 2 or 3 years ago, like I had another portable radio that was a piece of junk, and this fell off of it and I never bothered to pick it up. And I was like, that looks like that would fit. And it does. I mean, it looks like it was made for it almost. The only bad thing is that someone decided to etch their initials and a year on it. And so what I'm hoping is that this thing is solid brass, and I can just sand this off and then buff it out. Now, this, as I said, can run on either AC or DC. You had to buy a crap ton of batteries. You had two 45-volt batteries, the B batteries, and then the A battery is a 7.5-volt battery. And so these two B batteries, the higher voltage batteries, they're higher voltage, but they also are pretty low draw. So you could expect to get maybe 75 to, I've seen as far as 150 hours worth of use out of those. And the A battery probably didn't last as long because it went through the filaments. But you can see, like, this is not a light radio. And so filling it up with batteries, this thing would have been a kind of a brick. Now, I did try it out, and it's got typical AC hum, which is kind of be expected when you have the original electrolytic capacitors. I'm not going to power it up again to demonstrate that to you guys because these little 1 to 3 volt filament tubes are super sensitive, and so I'd rather just go ahead and start with the restoration process. And the very first thing that I'm going to do is replace these three values. This one may not be as big of a pain in the butt because, number one, we have a lot of room inside that chassis for a portable. And there's only three values, 240s and a 250 at 10 volts, which means I can put a teeny weeny little cap in there. This has a solid state rectifier in the form of a Selenium rectifier. You can actually kind of see the little fins. They're almost always positioned underneath a bunch of holes, so that has a little ventilation to keep it cool. So in order to remove this chassis, you take out there's 4 screws, one here, one here, one here, and I think probably the speaker is integrated into the frame. It is integrated into the chassis rather. So it's held in there pretty good, but let's take it out and pop off the bottom and take a peek under the hood. I get a feeling this has probably never been worked on. Even got a bunch of the original Arvin tubes in it. And I believe Arvin is still around. Maybe I'm getting my companies confused, but I think they're in the business of making, what was it? Some sort of automotive part. Exhaust systems, I think. Yeah, Arvin exhaust. So let's take this apart and take a peek under the hood. All right, so here is the innards. And as I suspected, it's not ever been worked on. This is all original. This is the underside of the electrolytic, and it's very easy to tell on this one since the whole side opens up here. That'll make it easier to work on too. And as with most of these sets, this is a floating chassis set. The can itself is a connecting point for the grounds for B plus and other parts of the set, and they're going to the can, but through this phenolic spacer, which keeps it isolated from the metal chassis. And that's pretty important. This big ass thing here, that is the grounding cap. And it's 1/10 of a microfarad, which is exactly 10 times too big for today's standards. We want to reduce that capacitance down to a 0.01, and it needs to be a special type of cap too, called a safety cap. I'm going to stop filming for a second because this camera suggested I adjust something on it, which is making the damn camera jump up and down. Hold on. All right, that's better. I was getting seasick there for a second. Anyway, we have 3 values here. We have our 40, 40, with their little stamped out shapes to represent each one, and then there's a 250 rated at 10 volts. It's pretty easy to tell because that lug right here with the yellow wire, that has no shape behind it. So by default, the other two are R40s. This blue thing is the Selenium rectifier, which we will need to replace with a modern diode, because when these guys tend to short, which they occasionally do, they stink. Like letting off a whole case of 2-year-old rotten eggs in your house, plus the smoke can be slightly toxic. And again, we're going to need to replace this cap. These round guys, these are ceramic disc caps. They're fine. Unless they physically break, they're fine. So there's really only, what I can see, 2 paper caps and 3 electrolytics. So there's not much going on. This is a major dropping resistor. This probably comes off. Where does this come off of? I'm guessing this is dropping stuff off from it's probably when you go from battery mode to AC mode, this guy kicks in to drop the amount of voltage down. I haven't looked at the schematic, of course. So anyway, we've got 3 of these guys to replace, and I will replace them with 3 new individual little electrolytic capacitors. All right, so I've got this partially recapped. We have these 2 40 microfarad caps, and I had found a 220 for the 250. I think that's close enough. And I'm just going to go ahead and I've got it running through my isolation transformer, which is that loud buzzing noise. And we're going to give it a test fire, see if it has come back to life. That is an unpleasant noise. I think it could be because I don't have the antenna connected and I'm running through an isolation transformer. So let's try this again. That clearly is not working right. Let's try that again, because obviously farting noises is not very pleasant to listen to. So I've got it hooked up to the antenna, and I've already got it turned on. I'm not going to touch the chassis, but I'm going to go ahead and just plug it in directly without the ISO. Clearly that was the issue. It's must be very sensitive then. This makes me worry a little bit about what's going to happen when I replace that that grounding cap in there with such a drastically smaller value. It seems like if it's having a fuss with the isolation transformer, probably doesn't take much for it to go off. Also, we're missing the shield on that guy. That's probably somewhat critical. I have some extra tube shields in my supplies. We'll definitely replace that. Alright, so I've replaced one of the only 2 paper caps, and now I'm going to replace the grounding cap here. And it looks like it also has a resistor going to ground. That's the incorrect value as well for our more desired modern standards. So I'm going to replace that cap with this safety cap. It's an X2 Y2 across the line cap, and this resistor. And those 2 together should get our current potential off of the chassis down to a safer level. And I've also added a tube shield. This tube was right between the 2 IF and RF cans. So I figured I couldn't find another tube shield. I think I've got one somewhere. I need to dig through all my shit. But anyway, we'll replace these 2 guys, and see if we're still firing on all cylinders. Hopefully the set's not going to suddenly start oscillating or making weird noises. Okay, so we got the safety cap and safety valued resistor stuck in there, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot, see if it still works and doesn't make any shitty noises. Let's see. Oh, that's odd. I think I've got a loose, dirty tube socket. Unplug it, set it up right. Work these guys back and forth a bunch. I probably should just go ahead and spray the oxide all over it. All right, let's try this again. That's way loud. All right.
Emotionally, words are literally, physically.
It looks like we're okay, so that's good. Sometimes if you have a problem where your set oscillates due to having that smaller value cap, you can just add a second 0.01 in there. You can have like 0.02, 0.03 is fine. I think when you start getting over the 0.4 or 0.5 threshold, that's when you start running into the problem where you're probably going to start tripping your GFCI, and there's going to be a little bit too much current on that chassis for being safe. So this is pretty much fully recapped. I am going to clean the volume control here with the little deoxit, and I'm just about to run out of this stuff. And just put a little bit into the area behind the wiper. I'm doing this one-handed, of course. Then you want to work that back and forth to get the wiper inside good and clean. Maybe do it again. And then what I'll do is I'll go and remove all of these tubes and spray a little deoxit in their sockets and stick them back them and wiggle them around a little bit. So now that we've done that, and I know the set is on its merry way, I'm going to begin the process of trying to sand off all that stuff. In fact, I just bought some Dremel bits the other day. I'm wondering if I can just do that instead of using all my elbow grease on sandpaper. Enough of that. So let me get this other stuff done, then we'll start figuring out a way how to remove those initials. I lied. I'm not done with the electronics because we still got to replace this guy. And I mean, these portable radios are pretty compact as far as the electronics are concerned. And so we're going to replace that big blue guy with this little bitty diode. It's a silicone diode, but here's the thing. These are not as efficient as a modern diode, and so you need to compensate for that lack of efficiency by throwing a resistor in front of it. And so the anode basically goes to one side of a resistor, and then the other side is your positive, and the cathode, which is the back end of the diode, would be your negative. And I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to install this little bracket here, this little mounting strip or terminal strip, right in that same place. And I think there's just enough room for these two to fit. By the way, I found this in my parts bin. Never heard of this. It's Wellwyn. It's made in jolly old England. So for the British folks watching, just know this radio is going to be slightly British when I'm done. Maybe it'll make it more refined. I don't know. So let's go ahead and replace this guy with the new diode. Give it a final test, and it'll be on to more fun things like working on the cabinet and the aforementioned etched knob, or the knob center. Alright, so we got our modern diode installed. It's that teeny little rice-sized thing back there, and hopefully I installed it right. If you get it backwards, it's catastrophic. I mean, probably what will happen is that this little wire wound resistor will just break open. Alright, well here goes. I'll know right away if it's not going to work, by the way. Oh, we still got the antenna hooked up? Oh, no matter. I'll find out. Whoa! Alright. Clearly that is backwards. That started smoking, so I need to reverse this. How embarrassing. See? Alright, so I did a switcheroo, and luckily no damage was done. So we're firing on all cylinders again. We got our modern diode attached. that resistor is not really getting that warm. It's just barely warm. Alright, so now it's time to move on to more important things, like getting that stuff off of this center cap. Alright, well I tried going after this with some sandpaper by hand. It's clear it's going to take a lot to remove that, so I got my multi-tool here, and it's loud as hell, so I can't really film it, and I need to wear hearing protection. Which, fellers, especially you guys that are got significant others, keep your hearing protected. That way when you get older, you don't have to worry about them having to yell at you for everything like my wife now kind of has to do. Well, working on that little brass piece took about as long as restoring the entire chassis. That's all brass powder, because I had to sand that much off just to try to get most of the engraving to disappear. You can still kind of see it, but I was actually wearing away so much of the brass that it was getting a little thin. And so I said, okay, heck with it. When you put it back on the radio, it's probably not that noticeable. And I used some Lexel glue, which is like my favorite glue on the planet. I've got parts of my car glued together with it. Anyway, I put the cap on with that glue, which goes in through the back and is going to also fill up all those little cracks. And I'm going to sit it in the sun. By the way, this is my 21st year of living here in California. And every wintertime when it gets to be about December, November, that time period, then it's still 75. That's very nice. So, I'm going to take this over to the sink and do a gentle clean. I especially want to be careful about that. That is chrome-plated plastic. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm probably going to go, you know what? I'm thinking out loud here. I could plastic polish this and then take it over and clean it in the sink and then get all the crap that's going to probably accumulate in these little squares when I polish it. I'm going to use the trusty old Novus number 2 on the case. Like I said, it's kind of a nice sunny day. I might just go sit over there in my chair, my rocking chair, and go to town on this for maybe an hour. Alright, so got the case all nice and polished up and everything. It's turned out pretty damn snazzy. Took a little bit of elbow grease, and when I was done polishing, I took it over to the sink and used a real fine toothbrush to get all these little pockets here to get the dirt out of it and the wax. And meanwhile, this knob has, well, I ain't going to stay closed. I'm going to put it on the floor over here. This is all nice and cured up and everything. I'd say unless you were a specialist about this model, you might not know the difference, but much better than just being blank. So the last thing I need to do is I'm going to add an audio input to the chassis. And basically, the plastic case is too nice to drill a hole through. And so I think what I might do is mount the switch to turning the IF signal on and off, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, somewhere inside the case, because there's definitely a bunch of different screw mounts that I could mount it to. But what does audio input mean? It means adding the ability for the user to switch the IF, which is the radio signal, on and off, and then plug in whatever musical device they might want to listen to, whether it be a Bluetooth or a phone, anything that has a 3.5 millimeter jack. And we're going to run it through the volume control, which is this guy. And it has 3 leads. It has a top, middle, and bottom. The bottom is the negative, the top is the positive for the incoming IF signal. And we're going to essentially use the set's existing amplification section to port our audio in, but we also need to be able to cut the IF signal. And so that means we'll have to cut one of these legs, well, separate the wiring from one of these legs and to put a switch in between that and the volume control so that we can essentially temporarily shut off the IF signal so that we have pure audio going through. And I'm looking at this speaker. Is this a crack? No, it's just an optical illusion. Good. Anyway, there's not a lot of room to work in here. I I think I have a game plan, but I think what I'm going to have to do is mount an isolation transformer here. There's not any room that's really on top of this chassis either, except here, which I don't want to do because that'll block off the ventilation for my resistor here. And it's pretty straightforward. I'll get the components out and I'll show you what those are. Hello everybody and welcome to day 2 working on the little red Arvin. And yesterday I installed the audio input device, which is this little isolation transformer which I place prior to the audio getting to the top end of the volume pot here. There's very little room in this set, so it squeezed in right here, just enough for me to be able to close the case. And so we have a primary side, which was this side, which goes to the volume pot, and this side, which has the incoming audio. And we have two 100 ohm resistors. Actually, I think those are 90. And the right and left channel goes through either one of those. I've explained this a lot in a bunch of my other videos, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. The other thing is that we have to cut the line that goes to the IF transformer so that we can turn that signal on and off, so that if the user decides they want to listen to the radio, they can do so. Or if they want to switch that off, then they can just listen to the audio without it being impeded by the radio signal. And what I'm going to do is this goes back on like this. I'm going to run the audio line through here and tie a knot so you can't yank it out of there. And that'll come through the same hole as the cord does. So again, we're not going to drill any holes in the case. I'm going to run an excessively long wire out the back for the switch, and I'm going to find a location inside the case to mount that switch. So again, I don't want to drill any holes here. I want to keep it, pretty much as intact as I can, because again, the case is just too nice to drill any holes in it. Okay, so I've got my Bluetooth device running into the transformer. Now all we need to do is run the switch wire. And I'm looking. I can't access that thing coming off of the transformer down there anymore. I'm going to have to use this wire for my switch lead. Anyway, we will do that and hopefully be on our merry way to having this guy done. It's always a challenge when you have stuff that's really crammed in there like that. The last thing I'm going to do before I button it up is, because this is so close, I'm probably just going to immerse all those little components that are on this transformer with hot glue just to encase them. Just in case this thing ever plops loose, it's not going to hit anything electrical in there. It's just me being OCD. But we're mostly there. Alright, so we got our little switch here for turning the IF and RF stage off. I just used some super glue and roughed up the two surfaces so there's no holes. And you won't see it from the outside. You just have to open the case if you want to do either or. And I reconnected everything. Everything's back in the case. I think it's time to do a test fire. Put the knob back on and this thing will be good to go. Alright, well, it is all done, and not without a last ditch bit of drama. When I tested it out, I was getting a very strange sound, almost like something was oscillating, but it was kind of a microphonic sort of sound. And I tapped the tubes, and the 1U5, for whatever reason, it tests good, but it's gone microphonic, creating this high-pitched weird noise. So now that I've replaced it, we're firing on all cylinders again. Doesn't sound bad, really. Like I said, if someone wants to operate the radio, all they have to do is open up the back and flip the switch, and then they can resume listening to the radio. But otherwise, it seems to be working pretty well. I'm going to let it run for a few hours just to make sure there's no other weird kinks, and it'll be on its merry way. anyway, this was kind of a challenge. I don't think I've worked on this model before. I don't think I've actually seen this model either. So, Miles, who donated this, thank you very much. Very neat looking piece. And I'll bring it to the museum Saturday. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave the comments down below. And if you like this channel or you like the video, then press that like button. Lets me know I'm doing something right versus making a jackass out of myself, which is probably not possible. All right, until the next time a radio comes across the bench. See you guys next time.